He never sought the spotlight, yet Raymond Patriarca ran one of America's most disciplined crime syndicates. How did he maintain control without drawing attention? For over 30 years, the Patriarca crime family operated as a nearly autonomous state within New England. While other organized crime figures in New York and Chicago frequently made headlines due to internal wars or public displays of wealth, Patriarca lived a modest life in Providence, Rhode Island. This analysis examines the operational methods, investigative breakthroughs, and eventual decline of a leader who prioritized administrative stability over public notoriety. To understand Raymond Patriarca, one must understand the geography of his influence. From 1954 until his death in 1984, Patriarca presided over the New England La Cosa Nostra. His headquarters was not a mansion or a high-end club, but a small storefront called the Coin-O-Matic, located at 168 Atwells Avenue in the Federal Hill neighborhood of Providence. Providence served as a strategic midpoint between the major criminal markets of Boston and the smaller urban centers of Connecticut and Maine. By centering his operations in a smaller city, Patriarca avoided the constant high-level scrutiny that New York City bosses faced. Under his leadership, the organization was strictly hierarchical. He served as the ultimate arbiter for disputes between various factions, particularly the Italian-American crews in Boston and the Irish-American gangs that frequently clashed over territory. His ability to manage these disparate groups through a combination of traditional hierarchy and calculated mediation defined his tenure. The Patriarca organization did not specialize in a single type of crime. Instead, it operated as a diversified, illicit economy. The primary revenue streams included illegal gambling, a massive network of bookmaking and numbers rackets that spanned several states, labor racketeering, influence over specific unions in the trucking and construction industries, allowing for extortion and the misappropriation of pension funds, loan sharking, providing high-interest loans to individuals and businesses that could not access traditional credit, often using the threat of violence to ensure repayment, extortion, collecting protection money from legitimate and illegitimate businesses alike. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Patriarca was known for his fiscal conservatism. He demanded a strict tribute system, where a percentage of all proceeds from his subordinates flowed directly to the top. Failure to pay or attempts to hide profits were met with severe disciplinary measures, ranging from financial penalties to sanctioned killings. The investigation into Raymond Patriarca was a decades-long effort that saw both significant failures and groundbreaking successes. In the early years of his reign, local law enforcement was often ill-equipped or compromised. Many local police departments in Rhode Island and Massachusetts lacked the resources to track an organization that crossed state lines. Number 1. The Coin-O-Matic bug, 1962 to 1965. The most significant investigative breakthrough occurred when the FBI successfully planted a listening device inside Patriarca's office at the Coin-O-Matic. For 3 years, agents listened to the daily administrative tasks of a Mafia boss. What worked? These recordings provided an unprecedented look at the invisible hand. Agents heard Patriarca ordering hits, settling gambling debts, and discussing the internal politics of the National Mafia Commission. It stripped away the myth of the gangster and replaced it with the reality of an illicit executive. The failure? At the time, the legal framework for electronic surveillance was murky. Much of the evidence gathered from the bug was deemed inadmissible in court because it had been obtained without a warrant that met specific constitutional standards. While it provided intelligence, it did not immediately lead to convictions. The use of informants. Law enforcement eventually realized that the only way to penetrate a closed organization was through flipping its members. The most notable example was the testimony of Joseph Valachi in 1963, which, while not directly focused on Patriarca, provided the public and the legal system with a map of the LCN structure. Later, figures like Vincent Teresa provided specific details on the New England operations. Patriarca's longevity can be attributed to his management style. He functioned more as a CEO than a traditional strongman. Strategic leadership. Patriarca maintained a hands-off approach to the physical execution of crimes. He rarely communicated directly with low-level soldiers. Instead, he utilized a layer of capos, or captains, who acted as buffers. This structure made it difficult for law enforcement to link him to specific acts of violence. Management of violence. Violence was not used for ego. It was used as a tool for market stability. Under Patriarca, murder was a bureaucratic necessity used to enforce discipline, discouraging internal theft or insubordination, eliminate competition, removing rival operators who refused to pay tribute, and ensure silence, killing potential witnesses or informants. The exposure points. Despite his discipline, two things eventually exposed Patriarca: the evolution of federal law and the inherent greed of his subordinates. As the FBI shifted its focus from communism to organized crime in the 1960s and 70s, the resources dedicated to tracking his movements increased. Furthermore, the very tribute system he relied on created resentment among younger members who felt they were taking all the risks, while the old man in Providence took the profits. The legal landscape changed forever with the passage of the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act in 1970. Before RICO, prosecutors had to prove that a boss personally committed or ordered a specific crime. Under RICO, they only had to prove that the boss presided over an enterprise that engaged in a pattern of racketeering. In 1969, Patriarca was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder in the case of a bookmaker named Rudolph Marfeo. He served several years in prison, but continued to run the family from his cell through his son, Raymond Patriarca Jr., and loyal underlings. By the early 1980s, Patriarca was in failing health. He was under constant indictment and faced multiple trials for racketeering and labor law violations. He died of a heart attack in 1984 before many of these cases could reach a final verdict. His death marked the beginning of the end for the family's absolute control over New England, as his son lacked the strategic discipline and respect required to hold the various factions together. The case of Raymond Patriarca offers several critical lessons for modern criminology and law enforcement. 1. The necessity of interagency cooperation. Patriarca thrived because he exploited the gaps between local, state, and federal jurisdictions. It was only when federal agencies began sharing intelligence with state police across New England that his organization began to fracture. The transition from intelligence to evidence. The Coin-O-Matic bug taught law enforcement that knowing a crime is happening is not the same as being able to prove it in court. This led to stricter, more professional standards for surveillance and the development of the Witness Protection Program to protect those who testified. The fragility of centralized leadership. The Patriarca family was built on the personality and discipline of one man. When that man was removed, the organization collapsed into infighting and chaos. This demonstrates that while centralized crime syndicates are efficient, they are also highly vulnerable to top-down prosecution. The myth of the clean mafia. Patriarca often portrayed himself as a simple businessman who helped his community. The investigation proved that his order was built entirely on the suffering of others, through the addiction of gambling, the ruinous interest of loan sharking, and the ultimate finality of murder. Raymond Patriarca was not a cinematic figure, he was an operational one. His ability to manage a vast criminal enterprise for 3 decades was a result of his understanding of power, distance, and discipline. He stayed in the shadows because he understood that in the world of organized crime, visibility is a liability. However, his story ultimately confirms that no organization, no matter how disciplined or invisible, can withstand the sustained application of specialized legal tools and federal resources. The dismantling of the Patriarca family stands as a blueprint for how modern law enforcement addresses sophisticated criminal networks today. By focusing on the infrastructure and the leadership rather than just the street-level crimes, the legal system was able to dismantle a state within a state that many once thought was untouchable.